Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. Now in the last segment I showed you a lot of instruments that were translucent. You could see part of the way through them, and I showed you some sketches and discussed how the instrument is made and the different parts of the instrument. I'm going to start off this morning and show you some pictures that I have taken of some of these translucent instruments and go over them, and then if we have time after that, and we probably will have some time, I will go over exercises, what they are, how to play them, and so forth. So we will start off with a picture of this, using this picture. This is one I showed you last week, a translucent instrument. It was a clear recorder. This is a picture of it. What I do is I take these in a photocopy place. I put some cloth or something around them so you won't see my hands holding them in place. And I got some pretty good pictures. But anyway, this is clear. This is the first one. And I took 2 or 3 pictures of this. This is the clear one, and it's on its side. You can see the slant of the mouthpiece, and the labium is going to be right about here, although that doesn't show up very well. And you can see these little, it looks like little joints or plastic pieces. They don't attach to anything in the body of the instrument, and I think what happens is they're put in there for strength or something. This is where the mouthpiece, the frontal joint, the head joint would end. This is where the body of the instrument would begin. Going from there, and this is another picture of it. I wanted to see the back side. It's a little thicker. The plastic is a little thicker there, but you can't really see much with it. But nonetheless, I took it, and the head joint came out fairly well, so I'm showing it. This was the gold one. With the green, it looks darker. You can see places where it is thicker. This is the head joint. The labium is here. I don't know as you can see it, but you might be able to see it just a little tiny bit. I can from here, but I don't know if the camera can pick it up. And you can see this is where the head joint ends. Okay, so I've put in some other pictures here, sketches. I'm going to go over them with you. But here you have a scale from C to C, back down to C. And as you know, I'm teaching you the B, A, G, F, E, D. And if I pick up my regular recorder here, and just to kind of demonstrate it for you, this is B, A, G, F, E, D. Now, why I'm such a stickler about learning it that way is that when you learn an instrument, you learn the simplest note first, and an instrument that will be easy to balance, and you don't want to go from the bottom up. You don't want to teach playing notes from the bottom up, because that's going to be a lot harder to master, but it's a lot easier to master if you do one note at a time. Then you can add all kinds of extra notes to that. And so this is the recorder, and here's the thumb hole in the back. All these holes are open. If you were to play the B, you'd close that one. A, close that one. I mean, you'd add one more key as you go down, and you close each one. I have here a picture of a fingering chart from the lowest C, where everything is closed, and I bring it up to the D up here, and then I start with the D and go back down again. I want these basic notes on the staff and close to the staff to be learned first, because they're the easiest ones to learn, and they're also the ones that you will use the most. I have the fingering for each one of them. And on this, I did it deliberately this way. if I put it all out, if you can scan that, I don't know if you can scan that, going from the low C on the left on this chart over here, getting it up to the D, that's good. And then starting from the D again and going back down to the C. So you can see, this is not, we don't have the flats and the sharps here, we don't have the accidentals here, but you can go right from the C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. That's one note above that octave, starting with the D and going right back down the scale to the C, and what we're focusing on is B, A, G, F, E, D. And going the other way, you're just doing it from an opposite direction, but those are the basic notes that you would be doing. And then I did another chart, fingering chart. I drew this out. This looks maybe more like a flutophone, but what I wanted to get was the thumb hole in the back. The thumb hole in the back plus all of the fingerings for every note. C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. That's a whole scale. And I didn't put it beside each other, but I split it up. And you can see with the F, there's two fingerings of the F, depending upon whether your instrument is a Baroque or a German instrument, which I will explain as we go along. And here's your C, B, and the tone hole is closed in the back. That thumb hole is closed on all of these, but you can add each finger to the list of fingers that are closed as you go through all of these notes. It's not really all that hard. Now I'm going to not explain this too much, but I will just explain that most instruments, they're keyed perfectly. You know, they're in perfect pitch. But sometimes you'll get an instrument that's not in perfect pitch. And what happens is, like a C melody recorder, which this is, by the way, which I use most often, if you are going to be flat, if the instrument isn't exactly in pitch, it may go flat. And if it does, it'll probably be in the key of B, which is 1/2 step below. Or if it's going to go sharp, it'll be in the key of C sharp, which is 1/2 step above. But when you have an instrument that's out of pitch, even by a 1/2 step, which isn't much, but it's enough to put you in an entirely different key. So if it goes to C sharp, which is right here, that would be the C sharp, then what you have is you have 7 sharps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Every single note of that scale is sharp. Or if it goes flat, it'll be in the key of B, and you have the key of B will be 5 sharps. And then you have these 5 sharps here. Not all of them are sharp, but part of them are. So an instrument needs to be in perfect pitch, because if it's not in perfect pitch, it throws you in a different key, a key which is pretty complicated. And I have here the keys that people play, and we don't play that much in the recorder, but we can play the key of G, which is 1 sharp. We can play the key of D, which is 2 sharps. We can play the key of B flat, which is over here, 2 flats. We can play the key of F, which is right here, 1 flat. And so we have several keys that we can play in. Instruments are geared to play in certain keys. With the C melody recorder, it's geared to play in the key of C, and C has no sharps and no flats. But that doesn't mean you can't play in other keys. With a regular instrument, such as, say, trumpet, trombone, flute, oboe, bassoon, you can play in any key. But when you have an instrument that has no sharp keys, no flat keys, and it's limited, there are only certain keys that you can play in. But you can play in C, D, G, F, and B flat. B flat is tricky because B flat is 2 flats, and that is real tricky, but I can get it to do it. You just have to know how. Now, what I want to do now is talk about exercises. What are exercises? And then I'm going to show, oh, wait a minute, before I do that, I've got to show you these 2 instruments. I said I was going to do this earlier. This is an instrument that, I don't know, I don't think I paid $1 for it. It's the cheapest instrument that I have, the least expensive instrument that I have. There is really no block. it's bendable. And even the mouthpiece is bendable. It does have that little labium. And then in the back, or if you look at the side, it's just pinched. That's all it is. And yet, it plays. I'm going to play it. I mean, it's not going to sound terrific, but I'm going to play it because it does play. It loses it. It gets about 4 or 5 notes. This is remarkable considering the holes are all the same size. They're all the same distance from each other. They're not necessarily placed in the right position, and it has no block. The labium is incomplete. There's no lip to it. It's really, really cheap, but it does play a little. It bends, and I paid less than $1 for it, but it still plays. The other thing I want to show you, the instrument that I want to show you, this is a sweet potato ocarina. I know it looks a little like a submarine, but it's called a sweet potato ocarina. The reason I want to show it to you is the fact that even though it doesn't have a recorder shape, and it doesn't sound like a recorder, it actually doesn't play very well. It's based on the same principle as most of the woodwind instruments, and it's based on the same principle as the recorders. If you look at it carefully, you will find, let's see, there is a little slit right there. I don't even know if you can pick it up with the camera. Just a little tiny slit. That's going to act as a mouthpiece. That's all it is. Now, some of the end-blown flutes have little slits too, but there it is. And then your labium is going to be right here in the back. And when you put your fingers on it, you put your fingers, like 3 of them on the top. There are tone holes here. The tone holes basically are in the front. And you put your fingers, and then there's a little place here. It's not a tone hole. It's a place for you to put your little finger. So it's just indented, and there's a little ring around it. Then you put your right thumb right here. This is a little ring for your right hand, your right thumb. And you put your fingers right here, and you play it like this. Well, this is the mouthpiece. I told you the wrong thing. This is the mouthpiece. So, nothing to brag about, but the reason I want to show it to you is it doesn't matter the shape. It doesn't matter the shape. It can play like a recorder can play on the same basis as that you just blow in it, and then it has a little place where it has a labium in it. It's not in the same place as where you would expect it. It's in the back of the instrument, but it still works some. So it's just proof, as far as I'm concerned, of the similarity of the instruments to each other. Okay, now I want to talk to you about exercises and what they are. An exercise is just a group of notes put together to practice. And it can be all kinds of notes. It can be part of a song. It may not be a song at all. If I have trouble playing, like, for example, from a D to an F to a B flat, then what do? You write an exercise and you put those notes down and you practice those notes. It can be with a key signature, with a time signature, or without a key signature and a time signature. It can be just the notes itself. It can have timing to it. It might not have timing to it. It can be anything, but whatever you practice it, they are notes that you need to practice because they're either difficult for you to get, or it helps you to become familiar with certain types of fingerings, and so the notes are put down like an exercise. I'm going to show you some. We have time to do that. I'll go from back to front. Here's, if you can see this all right, this is a complicated one. It came out of one of my saxophone books. Saxophone is my major instrument, and these are the Grand Virtuoso Saxophone Studies. That's the name of the book. And you see how complicated this is. And the other side, just as complicated. You really have to be a saxophonist before you can attempt it. But it is a study. It is basically an exercise, because that you see all of it is marked in terms of the treble clef, and of course the saxophone plays in the treble clef. Every note, every clef is there, and it's a group of notes or scales or series of notes that you just practice. It's not a song, but you practice it, because these are difficult fingerings or fingerings that are hard to pull off, and you just practice them. You can practice them slow, you can practice them fast. My suggestion is that whenever you practice an instrument and you don't know how to play certain things, play it slow, real slow, and then gradually work up to getting it faster. Okay, so here's another one. I just brought the books in because I didn't have time to photocopy this. But here's another exercise. And this is a complicated one. This one comes from one of my clarinet books. But some of them aren't that complicated. I'm going to put this down underneath here. Here's a song. You can make an exercise out of the song. This is another clarinet solo that I did. And this is called On Wings of Song by Mendelssohn. And the top part would be the melody part, and that would be the part that I would be playing. No way could I do chords on a clarinet or any woodwind instrument. It just doesn't work. But if I had trouble with it, I could take 3 or 4 measures and just practice those measures and make an exercise out of them. So it might be these measures, it might be these measures right here that I have trouble, and I isolate them and I play them over and over and over again. You know, the sad thing is I've listened to a lot of students play music, and I've been disappointed at the people who teach them. And the reason is that when they get to a hard part, they fumble over it. And then they play the rest of the song, they come to another hard part, and they fumble over it. Now, it's not that they haven't practiced it, but they haven't isolated what they're having trouble with and play with it over and over and over again until you get it. Now, it's boring, but so what if it's boring? You need to learn how to play it right. So if I had a student that had a problem with a certain 2 or 3 measures of music, we would take those 2 or 3 measures of music, isolate them, and just play those over and over and over again, doing it slow until we got it right. And then we'd do it a little faster and a little faster and take it up to speed that the music is written in. And when you do that, then you zip right through it like you do the rest of the pieces. And if you don't do that, if you don't make your practice time something that's really going to be helpful to you, you're going to end up by making the same mistakes over and over again. You can make exercises out of scales, as we have right here. You can make exercises out of different songs. These are diatonic scales. You could isolate any of these measures. You could take the scale itself. You can make an exercise out of that. I have written out some, well, let me take this first. Here is a book. It's a flute book. And it's called Standard of Excellence, and I used it a lot when I was teaching. So here are regular songs in the book, and usually they don't go through the whole song. They take the melody line or part of it, and you play that. This is what students do, and I wish they would do more, but I think they should have the whole song in rather than about half of it. But these are songs. You could make an exercise out of all of these songs. Now I come to the part, the end of the book. These are all exercises. They're not songs, but they're notes or melodies. Sometimes they're a melody, sometimes they're a little scale. Anything you want that you're having trouble with is an exercise. Now I think, and of course this is a regular music book, so in the end of it, it's going to have It's going to have a fingering chart for all of the notes that you can play. And it also has a diagram on that opposite place where it shows you where to put your fingers so you know what to do. And because you still need to be taught, because you can't read it and understand it if you're a beginning student. So I don't know how, I don't have much time left. I did write out some exercises. I'm just going to play a couple of them to use as examples of what exercises are. This is going to be very, very simple and very, very boring, but that's all right. That's how you learn how to play. So here goes the first one. Duller than dull. But if you are a music student and you don't know how to play, that's how you learn how to play. You know the notes. I'll be going over this more next time when we have another segment, but it starts real simple. Remember those old Dick and Jane books that you learned how to read? And when I grew up, we had these little books, Dick and Jane, and this is how we learned how to read. And they have little stories. Jane runs, Dick runs, Jane and Dick run, Spot runs with Dick, Spot runs with Jane, Jane, Dick, and Spot run. Repetitive, repetitive, repetitive. But that's how we learned the words. Spot, Jane, Dick, run, you know? And it's the same when you're learning music. You have to be repetitive. There are times when you just have to go over things over and over and over. And then when it's set in your mind, then you don't have to do that anymore. You go onto harder things and you do the same thing, but gradually you can play anything when you're finished. I remember asking my mother, why is it? I'm in the second grade and the first grade book seems easy, and now the second grade book seems hard. And she says, well, you've learned more, so you already know the first grade things. You go on to harder things as you grow up, more and more and more. And so that's the way it is with music, too. Now, I'm going to close it here because we're about out of time. We'll be doing exercises and songs and learning fingerings of notes next time. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.